the most important thing is making them understand that impact of stress and what these stressors are. Let's talk about you have to exercise less. And they do their Peloton class like 5 times a week. and the anxiety when I say, oh, probably, it's scale it down a little bit. So there's a lot of reassurance, a lot of talking and just telling. Really, women want to be empowered these days. They don't want to have someone who just tells them do this, do that. They're smart, they are reading. So they really need someone to explain what you said, the pathophysiology really behind it. This is not granola bar. We actually have data and we can show that. So that's how I approach that.
Welcome to MyMD Unscripted, where healthcare gets personal and the script gets tossed. I'm Dr. Clint Carter, ER doctor turned direct primary care freedom fighter, on a mission to challenge how our healthcare system treats patients in America. In every episode, my expert guests and I dive into real conversations about what's broken and how we can fix it by making healthcare about people, not just managing disease. It's time to rethink what healthcare should be and how we can make it better together. Welcome to the podcast. Hello, y'all, and welcome back to the MyMD Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Clint Carter, and I am privileged today to be joined by Dr. Christina Enzmann. This is going to be an educational one for me as well. We do a lot of this, but I know that we're going to be able to do it a lot better after today. Dr. Christina is a board-certified gynecologist that's certified in menopause with the Menopause Society and does functional medicine and brings it all for women's health with conventional gynecology and functional all kind of coming together. So I can't wait to have that talk. My question that I want to start with, and then I'll throw it to you, Christina, is why is it that so many women feel like their body completely betrays them in their 40s and beyond? With that, introduce yourself properly and let's get going.
Yes, hello. Thanks for the introduction, Clint. I'm Dr. Christina Enzmann. You'll hear it. I know you're going to be wondering. I'm originally from Germany, have been, however, over 20 years in the US. So my med school was indeed in Germany. But I did my training here, and that's that. So I have a doctoral thesis in Germany,
Awesome.
and I've been, working a lot in university medicine. And since a couple of years, I mostly do functional medicine in combination with menopausal medicine. So that's that for the introduction.
I mean, how did you end up going from, well, I'm sure there's a whole story on how you ended up going from Germany to the United States, but how about how you ended up going from like classic gynecology to getting into the functional side of things?
Oh, yeah. How it often is, we have to feel the pain ourselves. So, yes, I was also entering, menopause a little bit earlier. I was working at a university, so high stress job. And I thought, well, I'm not sure what's going on. And I was already trained, in conventional menopause medicine, North American Menopause Society. I loved it and I had plenty of patients. But there were always a couple of blind spots that official data didn't have good answers from the GI symptoms. I really, all my patients had GI symptoms. Nothing written in conventional medicine. The effect of the weight, it was always, it's only a couple of pounds they're really gaining. But, that was never a really satisfactory answer. And I gave this to my patients until I did myself. And then I was like, moment, that can't be really the thing. And that's when I, opened the toolbox of functional medicine. And I finally could help myself and I could really help my patients. And it was just also intellectually so interesting because finally it was not just, this is just the way it is, but it was like, oh, there are actually explanations and we can fix it. So that was it. Yeah. But I myself, had all the symptoms and I was angry and I had, hot flashes. I'm not so sure. I used to be cold, so I was just very warm all the time. And I remember at that time, I had gotten myself really a lot of collection of nice long boots finally. And I couldn't wear them at work because my feet would get so hot. I didn't realize nothing. That this was menopause. I had no idea. I was thinking this is stress and was funny. So I myself, as a practitioner, was in complete denial, knowing so much about menopause. And it didn't click until much later.
Well, I mean, that does explain it though. You spend that much money on boots and you can't wear them. We have a real emergency on our hands, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is important.
That was very rude. Yeah.
Well, and one thing that I think a lot of providers, we'll say docs, because in functional medicine, there's all kinds of providers on the table, from pharmacists to chiropractors and nurse practitioners and the whole gamut. But especially my my MDs and DOs that go from normal practice or regular insurance based residency training, and they get into the functional world usually out of desperation. I think I know that as I get further and further into sort of the functional stuff, is that I just love how science based it is. I just kind of assumed it was a little fuzzy and touchy feely and granola, but there's so much science. And so when I started, I love, and like how you mentioned that it just feeds the curiosity. You can just keep asking why,
Yeah.
and instead of that's just the way it is. You get there's another rabbit hole to go down and another one. So, what are some of the rabbit holes that you went down as you started looking into the functional? Like, what were some of the eye-opening things as you started going down the functional pathway that changed the way that I guess, the way you took care of yourself, but also the way you take care of your patients?
I think one big, so gastrointestinal, so the effects, when I really started looking into this, there wasn't really much out there. It came very slowly, the effect of estrogen on our gut microbiome, how the estrobolome changes, why that can cause, GI symptoms, leaky gut, food sensitivity. So that was something that was very satisfactory to finally be able to address that and help, these patients who had colonoscopies, all of that, often unable to eat anything. I was startled by it. Finally, I got that. The other thing, I think the other stepchild were these cardiovascular symptoms that these women, never tell anyone, please go always to the cardiologist first. But, these women wearing Holter monitors, going from one cardiologist to the next, having these
Yeah.
palpitations, panic attacks. So that was the other very satisfactory piece to kind of understand. And ultimately, so more recently, I'm really looking a lot of the effect on stress. So, I always figured it out. There
Yeah.
must be something. And then in the last couple of years, and now becoming mainstream, you can read it everywhere. There's the cortisol and the insulin, the cortisol and the hot flashes.
Yeah.
But, now everything goes so quickly with social media. But a couple of years ago, I was just scratching my head until I finally, someone talked about it. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Tell me now more about it. I want to really understand it. But I think the big thing is really how our stress axis, how this really affects the hormones, affects our metabolic health, affects much more things than we thought. And it's so difficult to grasp. So I really try to make it accessible to understand, in what forms can stress really hit us and why it's so important.
Yeah, I think those are two big things, right? The gut health bit, because everyone's talking about, the gut. It's getting more and more mainstream, but so microbiome is the word that most of the listeners will be familiar with, and it's just talking about all the bacteria that live in your intestines that are part of normal life, and having a healthy microbiome is good for gut health, but also inflammation and brain health and all the things, the hormones, all the stuff. But specifically within that, there's the estrobolome
Mhm.
that I would much less familiar with. So how does that, and I know that a lot of our listeners won't be, tell me more about how that works and how that impacts how you take care of your folks.
Yeah. So the estrobolome is just, it means the estrogen dependent or estrogen loving bacteria. So, and as
Oh,
our estrogen first becomes, a roller coaster in perimenopause and then slowly moves out, that substrate goes away for these certain type of bacteria. So that's basically a big bacterial tribes. They move out. And then I always explain it leaves like a little gap and then other bacteria then move in. So, and we have data,
yeah.
it's very clear that the postmenopausal gut microbiome looks like the one of men. Nothing bad about it. That's just what it is because it's lacking these estrogen dependent bacteria. And I always try to explain it's a very vulnerable time when these bacteria move out. They affect our transmitters, they affect estrogen metabolism, they affect how we metabolize our food. So, and if now the wrong bacteria move in or we are stressed, so there are
Right.
other factors that this gut can't rebalance. It's a natural transition. Nothing wrong about the midlife transition, but it's like a little shaky system. So if we are not in balance, then other bacteria move in or the more inflammatory bacteria take over the place, and now it can come to what's called the leaky gut. It can come to gut barrier
Right.
breakdown, and suddenly we have food sensitivities. That's kind of the rat hole it goes down.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. What about estrogen replacement? Does that, if a woman's on, say some bioidentical or otherwise relatively healthy version of estrogen replacement, does that allow the gut to reset? Are there certain probiotics you recommend, or do we just try to settle in with a healthy, you know, what men have always had, in a non-estrogen dependent biome?
So with hormone replacement therapy, I always prescribe it a lot, but it's not like, it can't fix everything. I always say it's a grand band-aid
Right.
solution, but you should always think like maybe it's sometime you want to stop it. Even there's no hard data that we really have to. But I'm like, well, maybe at some point you should consider if you can. So then you don't want to be back to square one. So that's the first thing I tell my patients. So this is a
Right.
lovely thing. It's going to work, but also, well, doesn't work always for everything. But we are also not bringing these estrogen levels with HRT up to 20,
Correct.
the woman who's 25 years old, right? We are going to give, like I say, the minimal level of estrogen to protect the bones. For many women, that works very well. It helps for the hot flashes, it helps the gut,
Yeah.
it helps, the mood. However, if women have what I call, we all arrive in midlife with a certain baggage of health, debt, I call it. There's such stuff we have,
Mhm.
we are dragging along, it's
Right.
underlying. And estrogen is this big buffer. It's like this big fire extinguisher. It helps with the inflammation, it
Yeah.
helps to buffer stress response. So that's now going away. So these things are going to, show up. Suddenly there are joint pains. Not everyone gets them. I think it's always important to mention that. So I think it's a big chance in midlife to really actually figure out what do we have accumulated. Let's really recalibrate. So we live from then on a really happy and healthy and hopefully life without many health complaints, either with HRT or we continue to live happy if we decide we're going to wean it out. So that's my goal and that's how
Right.
I see it.
Well, and without the buffer, stress goes up. All the little stressors become big stressors. And then that kind of leads you to point two of this stress axis. It goes from the brain all the way to the adrenal gland, and the other hormones are involved. How does that all interplay for that second part that you were talking about?
Yeah, so the stress axis is this menopausal transition is this metabolic and neuroendocrine event really. Because with the estrogen, we become less insulin sensitive, meaning carbohydrates we eat are now preferably stored as fat, and with that, cortisol level rises. Cortisol rises because the body realizes something is going on. The hormones are not doing what they were doing before. And estrogen is also this buffer in the stress response. Before, estrogen helped when we got angry, the spike of cortisol wasn't set that high and it would then go faster away. So this went away now too. So now we are more stress reactive and we become metabolically unhealthier because estrogen also affects fat distribution. So now we get more belly fat. Cortisol does that too. Belly fat has a lot of cortisol receptors.
Yeah.
And at the same time, propensity for inflammation is turned up with that cortisol. So now things that we were able to tolerate before, from our crying children to the dogs that need the vet to the husband, we can't tolerate that anymore. We are not so stress resilient. So my women
Right.
then tell me
Right.
they can't recover. And there's one more thing to stress, because we always think about stress, about that, circumstantial stress. But stress is also micronutrient deficiencies. if women stopped eating enough because they are trying to maintain their weight and they're
Yes.
always used to cutting
Yes.
calories. And some women are really good at that. They're cutting more and more calories and they're wondering, why don't I lose weight? Because the body is stressed.
Yeah.
The cortisol goes really up. And then the other thing I like to tell my patients, I have many very active patients. They over-exercise, and that is really very
Yeah.
unpopular, once I realized that link, these women who are exercising much more than I ever did, and, oh, they would not lose weight. It's all the opposite. They feel terrible. So that is also stress. So though these women, we have to explain, you have to scale back. It's gonna, and they do that, and then they're actually able to lose weight. But it's a very finicky, and you have to be a lot of, you know, gentle feel to really find the right way. So yes, so that is how the stress really affects all of that. And the high cortisol levels going to affect your gut microbiome. There's a
Yep.
direct connection from the gut to the brain. And we know when we are stressed, we don't want to eat, and there's a reason, or when we are in love or whatever it is, we know it's very sensitive. So this is how it really all connects.
And it's so connect. I mean, you just came full circle back to the gut, but you know, the, you get to a certain point in life, you get to middle age, and all of a sudden you're doing all the same things you always did, and now you're gaining weight. You can't lose weight. Things hurt that they shouldn't hurt, and you're like, what? Their regular, residency trained doctors like, well, you're just getting a little older. Things are getting a little harder. That's just kind of how it's going to be. It's
Yeah.
going to be all right. And I've got a good friend, and her secret to success is she just keeps her standards really low so that she's never disappointed, and then she's always happy. Well, okay, there are times where that is actually wise, but in this case, I love the connection between the gut and the stress and the estrogen and the lack thereof, and cortisol going up makes your insulin go up, which makes you store more fat, which is inflammatory and has all the cortisol receptors, which then increases your cortisol, which then increases your insulin and makes you store more fat. So it's kind of a cycle that's you're getting more visceral fat. The cortisol makes it don't sleep as well. So there's this, you've got sleep or lack thereof as a stressor. You've got over exercise. You've got under eating because you're just doing everything you can to lose weight. And not only you're not losing weight, but you feel terrible. So where do you break into that cycle? And then, the gut biome and the estrobolome and the changes there. So where do you break into this cycle and kind of make a real difference for your patients?
Yeah. So for my patients, because again, there are like these midlife patients who have plenty of issues accumulated. Often they were already, that's my favorite actually to be angry at. They were started on stimulants already because they are so fatigued. So they
Yeah.
usually a couple of years on stimulants and some antidepressives. So and
Yeah.
I don't want to leave any stone unturned. So I do very extensive functional. So I really look at their micronutrient deficiencies. I look at their hormone levels. I look at their cortisol awakening response. So very sensitive testing of their stress axis. I do very comprehensive blood work, gut health testing, and food sensitivity testing because I want to, they are driven. So I want to fix things fast. I really want to have a roadmap.
Yeah.
And I also do environmental toxin testing, and I'm always shocked what I really find. Many of these environmental toxins can also drive stress in the system, can drive mitochondrial dysfunction. So let's say, fatigue, oxidative stress, and
Yeah.
testing. So that's what I do. And then, because then I don't have to guess anymore. I don't want to guess. Of course, I can give them this and that, but I really want to know, let's see
Yeah.
which are the parameters that in you we have to really change. And then, we work on improving sleep, all the things that drive our cortisol, the sleep, get the right movement, not more, always
Yeah.
depends who is that
Yeah.
person. Help with supplements initially, understand how to feed ourselves. Of course, then heal the gut. I'm sure I'm not the only one who talks about that, finding the triggers and the food sensitivity. So just recalibrating that system. But I think the most important thing is making them understand that impact of stress and what these stressors are. Let's talk about you have to exercise less. And they do their Peloton class like 5 times a week. and there's the anxiety when I say, oh, probably, it's scale it down a little bit. So there's a lot of reassurance, a lot of talking and just telling, really, women want to be empowered these days. They don't want to have someone who just tells them do this, do that. They're smart, they're reading. So they really need someone to explain what you said, the pathophysiology really behind it. This is not granola bar. We actually have data and we can show that. So that's how I approach that.
Well, it sounds like it takes a lot of time and energy and personalization to get that done well. I know, like in my practice, we're direct primary care. So people pay us a membership and then we spend, an hour with our patients and really sort of dig into it and look stuff up after they're gone or look stuff up with them and kind of go through all that. So it's a very, my job is I'm the co-pilot, they're the pilot, right? My job is to educate them on where the landmines are and what the options are and where in this case, where the heck their body went and why it's going so haywire. And so it sounds like you do primarily a functional medicine practice now where you're doing a lot of these big, you're doing a workup on the guts and the hormones and the stress hormones and all the things. I mean, is that what you primarily do now?
Yeah, on these, very symptomatic patients, I still have a regular practice.
Yeah.
It's my smaller, where,
Okay.
someone comes in to just needs HRT. Sure, no
Yeah.
problem. But, then the ones who don't get better on that or have very complex, issues, these are the ones when I'm offering, okay, let's get this
Right.
addressed. Because otherwise, 3 years later, we're still, trying to doctor around. Let's try this, let's try that. They are not happy. I'm not happy because I'm like, I could have probably fixed that with more information within a couple of months. So yes, but I do have a regular practice and my other passion is actually vulvovaginal disease. Haven't mentioned this yet. So I
Okay.
deal a lot with vaginal microbiome. I'm also very convinced it's very connected to the gut microbiome. And I think many things we see in the gut, we actually also see in the vagina. Many of the pain syndromes. So yes, and that's why I always going to see patients because vagina, we just have to have a look at.
Nice. Well, I mean, everything, I mean, gosh, obviously it's very hormonally dependent. It's part of the body. Everything starts changing fast between urogyne with incontinence and those things exacerbating, plus just the vaginal health itself with intimacy and comfort and the different changes. So yeah, that's in our practice, it's hormone replacement, and then we have some devices to help kind of with that some, but you tie it all together into into a one-stop shop. Are you as we sort of like wrap up, do you take where are you located and do you see
I'm
patients outside of your area or?
Yes, so I'm in Maryland, but my office is that like in physical for real people that come to see me that is in Maryland and close to Baltimore. Yes, I also, online for the functional part, see them from
Nice.
wherever they, yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Yeah, well, there's probably, gosh, a ton of people that would love to get a real functional workup. And say, hey, what she's talking about, that's how I feel, right? Like, so patients who are just not feeling heard, who have been told they're just getting old and they need to eat smarter and exercise more and good luck. And here's your antidepressant and here's your Adderall and we're going to band-aid all the symptoms. So I think getting the opportunity to work with you or someone who does something very similar, it sounds super attractive. So what is your practice called and how could they get a hold of you if we need to dig deeper?
My website is drchristinaensman.com and my email is contact@drchristinaensman.com. You can just write me an email and I can always direct you, then I usually write back. These are the two options to have care with me, the functional part, and I explain a little bit who's a good fit for that. And I explain, where to reach me in my regular office. I do some of the vulvovaginal disease parts online, just so you know. Some of things, can really be dealt with. It's kind of edgy, but I was like, no, that's not possible, but it actually is. So many things, particularly if you don't have a good doctor who doesn't really know much about vulvovaginal issues, I'm probably going to be in 80 to 90% able to help you without even having a personal look. And that option exists too. And it's on my website, actually. So yes, there are some tests.
Okay. Well, okay. We'll get all that. We'll get your contact in the show notes so that it's easy. It's one click away. And visiting the website, I've been there. It's super informative. An email sounds like the way to get going. But in the meantime, while they're listening right now, what are some takeaways that you would say, hey, if they're having a lot of these, basically it's everything, right? Between stress and emotions and, basal instability and hot flashes and that kind of thing. What would you have our folks do? If someone's listening right now, what are some easy things they could do for themselves right now?
Hot flashes, the first thing, quit the sugar. The sugar and the carbohydrate. I mean, they're good carbohydrates, but if you eat a lot of sugar, that needs to go. If you're otherwise very carbohydrate heavy, I'm not hating on carbohydrates at all. They're important for many things, but give it a try. Many of my patients just quitting the sugar, they needed nothing else from me ever. So the
Wow.
sugar, hot flashes, right? So this causes this blood sugar up and down, and what then causes the high insulin. Insulin stimulates the thermoregulatory center in our brainstem. So where the estrogen blocks that before, now insulin. And whenever you have your cookie, you're going to have a hot flash. Quit the alcohol.
Ah,
Again, I have nothing against alcohol. Have your alcohol with your friends, but just then know you're going to have hot flashes at night. So don't come back and call me the next day and complain. Enjoy your alcohol, but you're going to have hot flashes. Again, stimulate the thermoregulatory center. Then protect your sleep. And I know this is easily said because that's the first
yes.
thing that goes away, but circadian rhythm, really,
Yeah.
many women, we are on our screens. We don't realize how important that is. So really go for that. And of course, hydration. So these are the first things I say. And then I want to say, if you're in your 30s, I think it's important to know that the stress axis is going to change. There's going to be a shift. And if you keep going the way you have been going in the same pace, doing everything at the same time, your body is going to adapt. And that's not going to be the direction you want that to go. So I think it's really, if you're in your 30s, think about it. You just have to change some things with some knowledge and it's going to be fine. But if you keep pushing, your body is going to complain.
That's great. And if you're not exercising, exercise. But
Yes.
notably, if you're over exercising, you might need to back off. And
Yep.
that's going to be a very personal response. But if you're, feel like you're like, I exercise as much as I could possibly exercise and it's not working and I'm not feeling well and I'm not losing weight and I'm not getting response I want. It sounds like we need to potentially have a conversation about backing off on exercise as well
Yes.
as sleep. And then Dr. Feelgood over here is telling us that we can't have our sugar or our alcohol. This is getting serious, Christina. I don't know.
You can, but just then don't complain if you have a hot flash. Don't be surprised. Go for it. Just no complaint. Yeah. And
I love it.
I think one thing we should mention, because with the exercise, so the cardiovascular exercise, so when we run, right, the tread, all that is what we have to be careful. The other thing that is actually pretty good is the bone building exercise or the muscle building exercise. So if I have something, I would say, cut that cardiovascular running, do a little bit more easy weights. That is a good way to get through that midlife transition. And, later on, when you're through this, the body has, adjusted and all this, chaos has settled down. No one is saying you might not be able to run more again, so, but give your body a little break and listen. I think that's the important message.
I agreed. And that muscle mass that you're building while doing resistance training is building your bones, but it's building your muscle. And when you build that muscle is also metabolic tissue. So now your weight's going to be easier to control. You have more mitochondria. You're going to feel better. You're going to have more energy. And then in the long term, if we're at midlife now, muscle is the currency of longevity. So getting getting that strength and then keeping it going forward, never too late to start training now for the next decade and the next decade and the next decade. So,
Yeah. And there's
wow.
so
Well,
many
Christina,
ads.
that was a fun. I mean, we went right into it right off the top. What are there any other takeaways before we let you go? But this has been great.
No, I think we got it all.
Yeah, so for me, some of the takeaways are the estrogen dependent microbiome. I had never really thought through that and how that changes the way your gut responds, on top of the fact that you don't have the estrogen to buffer the stress, on top of the fact that now you're going to have more cortisol and the body fat deposition and all the things. So I think for sure, I really appreciate you coming on. It's going to help I know it's going to help my patients, and I know there's going to be a subset of folks that are going to want to reach out to you directly. So once again, we've got all of that on the show notes so that we can go. You can see Dr. Christina at drchristinainzman.com. And then, gosh, we'll have you back on sometime. You did a great job. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Clint. It was really fun. Thanks for making it easy.
Yeah, of course. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me today on MyMD Unscripted. I hope today's conversation opened your mind and inspired you to imagine a better path for your health and therefore life. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone passionate about transforming healthcare. Real change starts with real conversations, so let's keep them going. Until next time, stay well, stay curious, and never stop pushing for better.